Welcome everybody to today's forecasting forum, whether you're watching it live or as a recording. And it's lovely to have you here. And as always, we start with some coaching questions to get our brains engaged and get ourselves started. So how many of you are feeling the gentle energy of Neptune in Pisces? This sort of like flowy, maybe even a little bit foggy and confusing sometimes, but very flowy sort of like energy, very creative energy. Anybody? And feel free, if you're watching this as a recording, to just sort of like say out loud what you need to say, pretend I'm with you in the room and you're participating. It's always a good way to do it. And then how many of you have a sun sign or a rising sign in Pisces? I know you have, Leah, you have the sun in Pisces, right? I don't have a rising sign or a sun sign, but I have Mars in Pisces. Yeah. And then how many of you have personal planets or angles in 23 to 28 degrees of Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, or Sagittarius? And of course, the reason why I'm asking that is because we're going to be talking about Neptune today, stationing within those degrees. You're going to feel anything. If you have any personal planets like the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, if you have any of those in 23 to 28 degrees of Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, or Sagittarius, then the Neptune station will impact one of your personal planets. So it's something to look up. If you're familiar enough with your own birth chart and you understand the degrees and the signs and stuff, then definitely something to look up and to see, is this impacting me? Anyways, first of all, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for your time. Thanks for taking the time to watch this if you're watching this as a recording. A little bit about me is that I am from Austria. I'm immersed in astrology for the last 2 decades, and I love doing it. And I'm excited to be finishing my first book really soon. So that's been going on in the background, and I'm sending it out to publishers right now. So I'm excited about that process. And what else is new? I guess, life has been really sort of up and down, sort of like these waves of like, woo. And of course, with the moon nodes being in Scorpio, Taurus, and me having my sun and my moon in Scorpio and Taurus, I've been really feeling that intensity of that. And learning how to balance out, my inner emotional world with my outer connections with other people and stuff, and my sense of abundance and, all that. It's been very interesting. So I don't know if any of you have been experiencing something similar, but yeah, these moon nodes are definitely have an intensity to them that other moon nodes don't. But let's talk a little bit about what we're covering today, right? So today we're going to be talking about Neptune and the station phase of Neptune, which started on June 15th, and it goes until July 12th of this year. That's when the planet is slowing down and moving much slower. So that for that reason, it's louder out there, and we can feel its vibration louder. And then, of course, Neptune also starts its yearly 5 months retrograde phase on June 28th, which is coming up, until December 3rd. And while Neptune is retrograde, we're accessing that energy more from the inside out. We're more connecting internally to how do we feel about Neptune, the archetype of the quality and archetype of Neptune, which of course has a lot to do with our inner sense of connectivity with the divine, with our intuition, with our ability to be creative and imaginative, with our ability to tap into universal love and flow, universal flow and universal trust, trusting life, trusting the universe, and whatever is showing up. And so Neptune is sort of teaching us about that right now, right? So I'll go into that in a little bit more detail as as we keep going. First of all, I want to say, this is not correct here. We actually didn't get any questions today. I think because of the Neptune station, people feeling a bit sleepy. So we haven't actually received any questions today, which is totally fine. If you have questions, of course, you get a chance to ask them at the end of the forum. I will answer anybody's questions that has questions. Okay, so feel free to ask them then. And if there's anything that you need to have answered in between that stops you from listening, then definitely ask that question right away. Okay, but if it's something that can wait, that would be great to have it be at the end. All right, so hopefully everybody has their charts. And if we can focus the questions on, the Neptune station and retrograde phase, that would be great, because then everybody can relate to those questions. All right. So, of course, this is our overview for June. Everyone has that attached, has the overview of 2022 in their emails. If you haven't seen it yet, check your email for that. And this particular thing, I will attach that also to the recording when I send out the recording later today. So what we see here, of course, is very clearly, the dates for Neptune, the dates when the station intensifies, because of course, as the planet starts to slow down, right, it's slowing down to come to a halt, which means that the slowing down, as it's closer to the halt, as it's closer to changing direction, it slows down further and further and further, right? Which means that this station intensifies as it's slowing down even further, and that will happen between June 21st and July 5th. That's when it's the very strongest, when we feel that energy the strongest. And it really creates this awareness, right? There's sort of like this awareness of this energy of Neptune. And of course, right now, we're still also in the Saturn station too, right? So the Saturn station will end on Sunday this weekend. So once that has ended, we will only be in the Neptune station. And, having a Neptune station and a Saturn station at the same time can be very confusing. It can be very contradictory, right? Because on the one hand, you have Saturn saying, you have to do your bit, you have to be responsible, you have to do what's right, you have to do what works. And it's very sort of like stern in terms of like its need for accomplishment and doing what's right. Our sense of obligation feels very strong as well, right? But the Neptune stationing, that energy is much more like, you need to let go, you need to rest, you need to sleep, you need to take care of your divine self, you need to be kind and loving and compassionate, right? So as you can hear from both of those energies, they're very different in their exaltation. And so, of course, because they're happening right now at the same time, it can feel very confusing to combine the sense of Saturn with the sense of Neptune, this higher sense of Neptune and the higher sense of Saturn. If we can do that, of course, it's great, but it can be challenging, right? Because they're so different in their archetypical energies. Now, next week will be a little bit easier once Saturn is no longer stationing and has gone back to its regular speed. Then we will only feel the Neptune station. But of course, that also means we then need to make sure we really take care of ourselves, our divine selves and our spiritual connections, and that we take care of, really tuning in with ourselves as much as possible. And that we also honor when we're feeling overwhelmed or when we're feeling kind of a little bit confused or out of it, that we're honoring that there is just too much going on maybe on the outside, in the outside world, right? That we need to really go more inwards, slow down maybe, right? So these are some things that can be very helpful during a Neptune station to just be aware of, right? And then the other thing I wanted to mention here too is, which I put an arrow to here on this page, is that Mercury will exit its post-shadow phase on July 18th, which is today, in the late afternoon. And when it reaches, this degree, because this is where the retrograde phase started. So as we're moving out of that post-shadow phase, we're also getting to feel a new sense of like new stuff can come in, new information. We can start to have a little bit of more of a flow with our communication, with our connection with other people, as long as we still respect Neptune, which is going to be telling us, right? I mean, Neptune, the station is always there to tell us, where do we connect to the higher vibrations of Neptune, and where do we connect to the lower vibrations of Neptune, or the more denser vibrations. And of course, the denser vibrations of Neptune have a lot to do with escapism. They have to do with illusion. They have to do with feeling confused, feeling overwhelmed. These are more like the shadow sides of Neptune. And in order to when we experiencing these shadow sides, these like denser vibrations, it's what can be very helpful is when we look to the opposite side of where Neptune is stationing, which, because Neptune is stationing in 25.5 degrees of Pisces right now, we want to look to 25.5 degrees of Virgo in our own chart, and to see where can we focus or bring more of that Virgo energy into the picture, so that I can feel a little less overwhelmed, a little less confused, a little less this need to escape and not be in reality. Because the truth is, with Neptune, when it gets overwhelming, we want to check out, we don't want to be in the world anymore, because the world seems painful. It seems overwhelming. We feel so sensitive, right? That's the other thing with Neptune station, is we feel sensitive. And, if you have a strong Neptune signature in your chart, or you have a lot of Pisces planets in your chart, or you are a Pisces or a Pisces rising, you know what I'm talking about here, right? Is there's a sensitivity that you're feeling, this empathy, feeling. Most people with a lot of Pisces are empaths. So they really feel everything that is going on out there in the world. They feel what's going on in the room with them. They feel energy with other people. And so it can be a little bit overwhelming when we're experiencing that much energy moving through us, and it's not even our own energy, right? So I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, who have strong Pisces or strong Neptune signatures. But the thing is, the thing to remember with the station phases is that they're there to help us understand a little bit better, like, how are we using the Neptune energy? Are we using it in its highest vibration, or are we using it in a more denser vibrational way? And when we are in that denser vibrational place, it's important to be kind and compassionate with ourselves, and to just say, okay, how can I move myself into that higher vibrational place with Neptune? And the best way to do that is to slow yourself down a little bit, be kind to yourself, and bring in that Virgo energy. And Virgo, right? Virgo has a lot to do with, being clear and objective, and approaching things in a more discerning, scientific way. Right? So what we want to do with Virgo, and this is the highest vibration of Virgo, by the way, we're not talking about the denser vibration of Virgo. We're talking about the higher vibration of Virgo. And the higher vibration of Virgo is all about learning how to discern without judgment, right? So it's not about saying, oh, this is right, wrong, good, bad, but to say, this is what's so right now. This is what I'm observing. This is what I'm seeing. And here's the conclusion I'm making. I'm making the conclusion that because I'm observing this, or I'm seeing this, there is this is what works and this is what doesn't work, right? So we're coming at it from a very objective, very clear-minded place. And so Virgo and Pisces together, when we can create this connection between Virgo and Pisces, where we can really find a beautiful collaboration between those two archetypes, we end up being in a very high vibrational place, usually with both signs, because that balance gives us what we need in order to get into that higher vibrational place with both signs, right? So I hope all of this makes sense so far, and everybody can follow. One other thing I want to say, I guess, is that, you know, with the retrograde phase that starts on the 28th, we're definitely, you know, being invited to kind of go within and really start connecting to our higher selves, to the universe or to source, from the inside out, right? To really understand that the whole universe is inside of us, you know, that there is that we are always connected, right? That there's never a complete disconnect, even if it appears that way to the mind, even if it appears that way when we look at the outside world, it appears as if there is disconnect and separation, but internally there is never, if we're going to that very deep inner heart-centered place, there is no disconnect ever with anything. It's just complete connection and peace and oneness. And this is something that we're trying to understand or get to during a Neptune retrograde, is to find this inner connectivity with ourselves and to not feel such a separation. And, you know, it's obviously it's easy to find separation with the outside world, because the outside world seems as though it is separate from us. But what we also do often as people is that we separate ourselves from ourselves. And that's where we really need to start. That's the beginning of it all, because when you have separation with yourself internally, it's natural to experience the outside world as separate as well, because that's just a reflection of what goes on inside of you. But when you're able to internally connect with yourself in a way that you understand that you are always okay, and that you always taken care of, and that you are always intuitively and energetically connected to all wisdom and all knowing, then there's no need to feel separate. And therefore it also becomes easier to see the connection and the oneness out there in the world. So if you are someone who sees separateness all over the place, who sees disconnect all over the place, start with your own self. Start with connecting the dots in here. You know, start to really see how can you create oneness and peace inside of you, because that will shift what you experience in the outside world. Does that make sense, guys? So that's just kind of what I'm trying to, so that's what we're all trying to get to during the Neptune retrograde, is trying to get to that place where we can align a little bit better with our soul's desire for love and oneness, right? And with our intuition, with our experience of flow, you know, trust, these kind of things. That's what we're trying to get to during the retrograde phase. Now let's take a quick look at some of the charts that I have here for the station retrograde. So Neptune starts to station retrograde at 25, almost 25 and a half, because 27 minutes is like almost 30 minutes, and 30 minutes would be exactly a half of a degree. And so 25 and a half degrees of Pisces. And as we can see, the day it goes retrograde, it makes a trine to the south node here. and it makes a sextile to the North Node in Taurus. So what that tells us, and this has been something that's been going on for a while, is that the moon nodes have very strongly been connected to Neptune. Not only to Neptune, but also to Neptune, right? They were also connecting to Saturn and to Pluto because they're all in late degrees, right? But since we're talking about Neptune right now, let's stick with that. So that trine with the South Node and Neptune is really an invitation for us to take advantage of this universal love and this universal understanding of everything is going to be okay, and everything is okay already. And then that we can really trust, the process of what's going on here with the South Node in Scorpio. And each of us will experience that a little bit differently, right? But the South Node in Scorpio is an invitation to pay attention to all the traumas and attachments, emotional attachments and fears that we have in our lives and that we've had in our lives up until now, in terms of our past and in terms of, our life up until now. And, to really take a look at those emotional attachments with other people, to take a look at the fears that we have, to take a look at the traumas that we've lived through, whether they are physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual traumas, whatever we've experienced that's traumatized us in connection with, whether that's other people's resources, whether that's intimacy, sexuality, whether that's, connection to relationships, intimate relationships. We want to take a look at that and really become very clear on how can we approach things differently? How can we let go? How can we surrender our fear? How can we surrender our traumas and really allow ourselves to move beyond the trauma, move beyond the pain, move beyond the fears? And Neptune supports this, right? Because Neptune says, trust, know that you're okay. Know that right now in this now moment, you are okay. So Neptune always gives us the opportunity and permission to get very present, to get very connected to what is so right now and to what we're feeling and sensing right now. So that's in a way how we're able to support this South Node process within Scorpio currently. Okay. Now, Neptune will end its retrograde phase at 22.5 degrees of Pisces. So as you can see, it's really not going to be a lot of difference because Neptune moves extremely slowly. So it only goes from 25.5 to 22.5. That's 3 degrees. And so again, we'll have, when it goes direct, there is going to be some squares that we'll be experiencing with Venus and Mercury at the time, because on December 3rd, Venus and Mercury will be in Sagittarius. So these squares here, they can create some overwhelm. They can create some discrepancy between external and internal, extrovert and introvert, right? Because Sagittarius is much more of an extroverted energy. So we might need to make some adjustments here, right? When Neptune goes direct again, and that will be the next station phase, right? So whenever the planet goes direct again, he has to slow down again, stop, and then start up again. So during that time, we'll have Neptune be exalted again. So you can check also in your birth chart, do you have any planets or signs, any planets, personal planets or points like the ascendant or the career point in, let's see, 19 degrees to 25 degrees of the mutable signs, right? Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, because that will impact you as well. And, if you do have a lot of mutable signs in your birth chart, you already are someone who is feeling very sort of like easily overwhelmed, I would say, with a lot of mutability in your chart. So you always want to make sure that you find a way to ground yourself internally if you have a lot of mutability, right? Ground yourself internally through prayer, through meditation, through walks in nature. These are all things that Neptune and Pisces provides to ground ourselves internally. The other way to ground yourself could be through Virgo, through writing lists, through looking in a very objective way and observing things and being sort of like emotionally detached a little bit, right? In a very scientific way. Here's what's so, here's what's not so, right? So these are all things that can help us during the Neptune station, and if you have a lot of mutability. Now let's look at our own charts. So these are both my birth charts, which a lot of you have seen many times. This is the time passage birth chart, and this is the astro.com birth chart. And what we want to do here is we want to just take a look and see like where does Pisces show up, the Pisces symbol in the birth chart, right? So these are this is the Pisces symbol here. This is the Pisces symbol here, right? Then also, where does Neptune show up in our own birth chart, right? So this is the Neptune symbol here, and this is the Neptune symbol in this chart. And then we want to also take a look at where is 25.5 degrees or 22.5 degrees of Pisces in our birth chart. Where does that land? And so let me just go to a bigger chart here, which is, this is my time passages birth chart. And I highlighted Neptune because since we're talking about it, so we can see a little bit more clearly how does Neptune in my birth chart connect to any of the other planets in the chart. And the reason why we want to start there is because the natal planet always gets influenced by the transiting planet, right? So whatever the transit is doing, wherever Neptune is currently in the sky and its station, it influences the natal planet. So we look at that and we go, okay, how is it aspected? So my Neptune is retrograde, first of all. So that's one thing we want to look. Is it retrograde or is it not retrograde in the natal chart? If it is not retrograde, then you will feel much more connected to the Neptune energy when Neptune goes direct in the sky, right? When you have Neptune retrograde in your natal chart, you will feel the connection to Neptune much more strongly when Neptune is retrograde in the sky. Okay. So because I have a Neptune retrograde in my natal chart, I feel much more connected and in sync with the Neptune energy once Neptune goes retrograde. So from June 28th until December 3rd, I will feel very much in sync with that energy. Now, if you have a retrograde planet natally, but Neptune has gone direct by progression. And so for those of you who don't know what a progressed chart is, feel free to ignore what I'm saying right now. But if you do know what a progressed chart is, then take a look at your progressed chart as well to see, is Neptune retrograde or direct? Because if it is direct in your chart and it's retrograde in your natal chart, right? Then you might feel a connection to Neptune during both phases, but you will feel a stronger connection to whatever the progressed Neptune is doing, because the progressed Neptune is what you're currently resonating with, right? So you feel it, you feel a little bit of both, you feel connected at both times probably, but if it's already direct by progression and retrograde in the natal chart, you will feel more connected to the Neptune energy during the time Neptune is direct. I hope this makes sense, okay? And if it's the other way around, if it's direct in your natal chart and retrograde in your progressed chart, then you will feel more connected when Neptune is retrograde, okay? Now, let's take a look at these aspects here. So we have Neptune trining the career point in my chart, opposing Venus, and squaring Mars. And this is because Neptune is part of a T-square in my chart. So there's always this sense of kind of like feeling a little bit like, like things like wanting to connect in a very, wanting to connect to other people in a way that feels like you're connecting to their higher potential, right? Especially if you have Neptune opposite Venus, or if you have Neptune opposite the sun, or if you have any kind of Neptune opposition really to another natal planet, you will find that you always want to connect to other people, either in a way where you can feel their highest potential, you want to see their highest potential, or you see something in them that's not actually there. So you can get also disappointed, and you could also sometimes experience this sense of betrayal as well if you're not being realistic about who other people are, right? If you have that opposition natally. Now with the square to Mars, there is sort of like, and of course my Mars is also in Pisces, so the ruler of my Mars in Pisces squares my Mars. So this is a little bit complicated, right? So there is this sense of like feeling that there's always an adjustment that needs to be made. So on the one hand, there's this want for connecting in this spiritual way, universal way, in this love-based, compassionate way. But here we sometimes feel a little bit like it's just either too much chaos, too overwhelming. Sometimes we feel victimized when we have a square like that. This could also be someone, and by the way, I'm not saying this is me, all of this. I'm just talking generally speaking in case somebody else has that aspect as well. But this could also be someone who has, delusions about their ability to do things, because Mars, of course, is our masculine energy, our doing energy, being too highly, living too much in fantasy, living too much in like in a dream state about certain things, right? And then also there could be alcoholism, drugs, escapism with this, right? People could experience that as well with a strong Neptune, this need to escape and to want to be free from this feeling of sensitivity or overwhelm, or just feeling disappointment, about life. That can happen with Neptune as well. Okay. Now, yes.
You said is that last description of that wanting to escape, etc. You said with a strong Neptune. Again, is that in the natal chart?
Yes, in the natal chart.
Okay.
In the natal chart. And then of course, with the transit, right? If the station happens on a natal planet, right? Let's say the station would happen on my Mars, right? Then of course this would exacerbate everything that I already shared here about how Neptune is aspected in my chart, right? Because if the station also aspects a personal planet as well, then we would feel that even stronger. Does that make sense, Marcia?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the question. Okay. So let's take a look at our own birth charts, right? And let's take a look at the Neptune, the natal Neptune placement. And let's also take a look at what house that's in, right? First of all, especially for those who are new to astrology, we always want to start with the house placement, right? And so this is a handout that all of you have. So the second house is the area of self-worth and self-esteem and the things that we value. So if the second house is the house of what we value, right? So Neptune in my second house means that I value everything that's connected to Neptune. So I value spirituality. I value compassion. I value creativity. I value universal connectivity, intuition, things like that, right? I value all of those things. And because my Neptune is in Sagittarius, I'm sort of like a seeker of spiritual truth, a seeker of connecting more authentically on a spiritual level with myself. And this is what I value about myself. What it also could mean is that I value being sort of like a savior, or being someone who is, you know, like a, how do I express that? Someone who's sort of like a good person, and who is like love, and who's like, you know, all the romantic notions that we can also have about Neptune, right? So this is something I value as well. And this is something that I sometimes struggle with, right? Because I am not just Neptune, right? Like I am all of these other things as well. So there are parts of me that are not always good. That are parts of me that are not always compassionate. There are parts of me that are not always connected to my higher self, even though this is something I value greatly, but it's not always the truth that I live. So when other things show up in my chart, you know, like a transit to my Saturn or to my Pluto or to my moon, and it triggers something, or to my Chiron or whatever, and I cannot be that Neptune, that can be very confronting, right? Because then you're like, oh no, who am I? I thought this was so important to me. It was so important for me to be in connection with this Neptune energy, and why am I not in contact with that, right? So that can also bring up, you know, issues with yourself, right? As well, no matter what planet you have in the second house, you know, if you have any planet in the second house, that planet is something that you value greatly. Okay, it's important to you. Does that make sense, guys, what I'm saying here? Yeah. So look at the house placement, right? If you are more advanced, which Leah and Marsha, you're both more advanced with your astrology. So also look at the aspects. And then let's take a look at the transit, right? So let's go to the bi-wheel chart. So this is our bi-wheel chart, which shows the natal chart in the middle. And then on the outside wheel is the transits, right? So if we look at this bi-wheel chart, we have Neptune here in the 5th house. And so what we have to do here is, like, the 5th house, this transit, this station here in the 5th house is happening in the house of creativity and romance and self-expression and, you know, joyful wonder, or whatever, you know, that's sort of like your inner child house, right? Or children. So in this house, this station is happening, but it also impacts how I see myself and what's important to me, and my self-worth and my self-value, right? So my self-worth is very much dependent on, you know, me living out this Neptune energy and personality, right? And when that's not being lived out, my self-worth goes whoop, plummet, right? So this is something that is very good to know about myself, because when you know this about yourself, then you can start to be more compassionate with yourself. You can start to kind of like bring in a little bit more of a trying to balance things out a little bit more, and trying to go, you know, it's okay. Like, I am all of this. I'm not just this, right? So bringing in self-compassion is very powerful, right? And the Neptune station gives us the opportunity to see, how do we do with self-compassion? How do we do with self-forgiveness, right? Don't mind you know, being compassionate with other people or forgiving with other people, because that only happens truly when we can be compassionate and self-forgiving with ourselves, right? So this is something that's really important. And you always want to start with your own process first before you go to the process out there in the world. Okay, now here we can also see that Pisces also rules the 5th house as well. That's on the cusp of the 5th house, right? Because that's always where the beginning is of the houses goes counterclockwise, right? So this is always the beginning of a house. This is the beginning of the next house. The 6th house is the beginning of the 7th house, right? I'm just saying this for people who are not as advanced as you guys. So so we also want to look at if if Pisces rules a different house than where Neptune is currently stationing, we also want to pay attention to that. In my case, it's the same house. So definitely the fifth house. And, you know, if we go back to what the fifth house represents here, right? I already mentioned all of this pretty much, but, you know, you can see here when you read what it says in the handout, it gives you a really good idea of where this energy is taking place right now archetypally, and where you're experiencing it the most, right? And where you're experiencing the station the most, and how that impacts then the natal placement as well. Now, the next step that we can take here, if you are more advanced, is to see what aspect is the stationing Neptune making to your natal chart, because obviously when it is stationing in one place, it will be there for a long time, right? It will be in that same degree for at least 1 month, right? So that means that it will be making an aspect to, if it is making an aspect to anything in your natal chart, it is making that aspect for quite a while, right? So in my case, there's a sextile to the sun in Taurus, and that sextile will be in place for quite a while. And then once Neptune moves to 22.5 degrees, it will make that sextile to my Mercury, but it will also probably make a square to my Saturn, right? Because Mercury and Saturn are both in a similar degree, exactly 30 degrees apart. So we have a sextile here, we have a square here, okay? And that just means that whenever there's a sextile, it's an opportunity, right? What is the opportunity, right? So let's look at the archetypes that are involved, right? Neptune, the opportunity of heart opening, right? The opportunity of connecting more to our own creativity and our own divinity and our ability to trust, brings the opportunity to the sun in Taurus, which is very grounded and real. And it's all about, you know, the physical world and physical abundance and physical comfort, right? Taurus, physical comfort, physical abundance, right? And so the opportunity here is to bring more of a heart opening to that connection with the physicality of life, with my own body, with my own, you know, connection to physical abundance and physical comfort that I have in my relationships with other people, right? Because it's in the seventh house, and to just maybe trust a little bit more, right? The opportunity here is to trust that the physical is taken care of, or the physical connection or the abundance that I have with other people is taken care of by simply being me, trusting, being self-expressed in a heart-centered way, and to just trust that that my connections flow from there, right? That's the opportunity. Is all of this clear right now, what I'm sharing here about the transit, the Neptune transit? Do we have any questions so far? Or shall we keep going? Okay, sounds like everyone's clear. All right, if you're watching this as a recording and you have questions, definitely email me. If I can answer the question via email, I will. If it's a little bit too complex of a question, I will ask you to either do a reading with Leah or with me. Leah is my one of my soul-based astrology students who has finished her curriculum with me, and she's now a soul-based astrologer and works with me, and she does wonderful readings for people. And you can either get like a whole life reading with her, or you can get a 25-minute reading with Leah. If you have just a one question thing, 25 minutes is plenty. But if you want something a little bit more in depth, then definitely the whole life reading is the way to go. And then of course you can always also do readings with me. I have a ton of readings available that you can connect with. All of this, by the way, is also part of the email. If you want to take a look at the handouts in the email, then these are my astrology courses. If you would like to become an astrologer yourself, or you would like to have a little bit more of a sense on how to read your own chart, or charts of your partner or your family, then this is definitely the way to go. The basics course is a great beginning. And then there's also a whole curriculum that you can do if you wanted to become a certified astrologer with me. Okay, and then these are tutoring sessions that are available with the online classes. So this is something that's available to you. As a star member, you get one for free. And if you're not a star member, you can buy them in bulk or just one by one. There's 25-minute sessions and 60-minute sessions. Okay. Then let's see, we have coaching healing sessions. If anybody feels like they need to do more deeper emotional work that's more connected to what we're experiencing currently with the South Node in Scorpio, which is fears, emotional attachments, traumas from the past. If there's anything like that, coaching sessions are perfect for that. If you're going through something deep, dark, intense, coaching sessions are great. If you're in transition of some sort, whether that's love life, career, family, anything like that, this is a great way to get support. And then webinars, I have a bunch of webinars right now that are available on sale. So take advantage. I've made them much cheaper than I normally would. Jupiter in Pisces, which is, we're going to be having another phase of Jupiter in Pisces towards the end of the year. So if you want to look into that webinar, that is now only $28. It was $37 before. Then we have the look ahead for all of 2022. If you haven't seen that yet, that's a great one to watch. And then the Saturn-Uranus squares, which are still ongoing all of this year, not as intense as last year, but still ongoing within 10 degrees. We're going to start feeling the square a little bit stronger again in the fall. So from September onward. So feel free to take advantage of those sales. And this is something that you'll have in your handouts as well. If you have any questions about memberships or anything, feel free to reach out and ask. This is the next monthly forecasting forum. We'll talk about the Jupiter station retrograde phase in Aries, but then also we'll talk about Uranus conjuncting the North Node in Taurus and what that means for all of us, right? So these are the dates. And then if you want to ask a question in advance, go to your membership account page, go to forecasting forums and submit a question right here. Or if you're not a star member, you can register here for this month only, and then you'll get an email sent to you where you can ask your question in advance, or you can become a star member as well, if that sounds like a good idea. All right, so let's go to questions. Anybody, Leah, Marcia, any questions for me about Neptune? Anybody who wants to understand their own transits a little bit better?
So a strong Neptune, and we talked about that as far as a strong, I don't remember which one it was last month, but I think I have a strong Neptune. I've got it. It's actually conjunct Venus. It's also conjunct my sun in my sun sign of Scorpio in the 4th house. Okay,
let me open your chart here. Can you see this, Marcia? Can you see your chart?
Okay. Yes.
This looks familiar, yes?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. So if we look at your chart, yes, you have a very strong Neptune. And the reason for that is that it's conjunct your sun, it's conjunct your Venus, it's also conjunct your Jupiter. So you have this stellium here, right?
Yeah.
And the stellium starts with Venus and it ends with Mercury, right? And so one thing is when we have Neptune included in a stellium that includes personal planets as well, there's definitely that's a strong Neptune signature in your chart for sure. And that means that that the Neptune energy is something that you want to know how to handle really well. Right? Because if it's not handled really well, it might sometimes trip you up a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I want to escape.
Yeah. So just tell me a little bit, because I mean, this is also intercepted in your fourth house, right? So this is a very personal experience for you, right? And it's probably also a little bit private. I don't want you to share anything that you're not comfortable sharing, obviously, because this is being sent out as a recording, right? So be aware of that. But I was just curious, like, if you had to put into words, how do you experience this Neptune energy with yourself? Like, do you feel like you are capable of being compassionate with yourself?
I'm working on that. It hasn't come naturally. As I've growing and all of this, I've just what you were talking about earlier about how we are dealing with things internally is reflected outward. Yes. And so I'm really working on that a lot. It's not my go-to place.
Yeah.
My go-to place is more Virgo, criticize myself and those high expectations, which is where, and I haven't really ever paid attention to Neptune too much in my natal chart, and it's been a while since I've really immersed myself in all this, but because it's a slower moving planet and it's just, it's a lot to take in. So, but what you said earlier really grabbed me about the freedom, wanting freedom. And, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, that really wanting to escape, but then the other parts of me, doesn't deal well with that. I have a tendency to take on a lot. I have my whole life, sometimes taking on things for other people, which is, not necessarily the best for me. So it's like an epiphany here.
Well, I mean, you were saying earlier that you relate more to that Virgo energy, which rules your third house, right? So your inner dialogue with yourself is connected to that Virgo energy. And then of course Mercury rules that third house and is in Scorpio. So that can be very black and white, very extreme, right? So your inner dialogue probably is quite extreme at times, right? Where you're just like really hard on yourself, like, got to do this or boom, like it's either all or nothing, you're either in or out. Kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Well, and the Scorpio that energy is that way as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, because Mercury is in Scorpio, right?
Yeah. So, and as I said, I'm really working on that, almost daily, because I recognize that's something to help, relieve some of my own kind of self-inflicted stuff. But it's a process.
It's a process. And, having that many planets in Scorpio, it's really important that you ground yourself in that Taurus energy as well. And luckily you have Mars in Taurus. So you do tend to, how to ground yourself in this, like, I am taking care of stuff and I'm reliable and I keep moving forward, in terms of your career and your work, right? How to do that. And it probably helps you relieve some of that stress that you feel down here, because this can feel quite overwhelming, right? And this is the thing with Neptune, right? If you have a Neptune signature like this, you can get easily overwhelmed with yourself, right? It's not even that you might be overwhelmed by others, but just with yourself, you can be overwhelmed, right? Yes. And so the key here is to be extra kind with yourself, right? Like really learning how to trust that you're going to be okay no matter what, right? Trusting that, and then also learning to see yourself as human, learning to see yourself as like a part of the whole, You know, you're part of the whole, you're not separate, right? And Neptune teaches us that, you know, Neptune teaches us that there's more than, you know, we have all these different parts that look like they're separate from each other. But really, energetically speaking, if we look, you know, on an energetic level, everything is interconnected with each other. There is no such thing as separation. It doesn't really exist. It's just that the human eye perceives it that way, right? Like it's an illusion, really, in a sense, right? Separation is an illusion. But we think of it as like, as human beings, sometimes we think of it as like that, you know, oneness and interconnectedness is the illusion, you know, because I can see very well out there in the world, nothing's connected. Like everything's fighting with each other, you know, like everything's in disarray and in war and whatever else, right? So it's easier to believe, right, that the separation is the reality and separation is the truth, when really oneness is the truth, right? But it's because we're focusing rather than focusing on the inner and the going beyond the physical, right? We are focusing purely on what we can actually see and what's out there and what's physical, right? So our focus is what really needs to shift, right? So do you have any kind of practice, Marcia, any kind of like practice that helps you be connected with yourself internally?
Yeah, meditating, and I do it almost every day. And that's been something I've started in particular more regularly in the last like 8 to 9 months, because what you just described, it's helping me, you know, access, if you want to call it the Neptune, of that trust.
Yes.
And that divine, that we all are connected, because that is the divine. And I get the concept.
Yeah. And
I feel it sometimes, you know, when dealing with the world, but then sometimes you don't, you know, and yeah, the meditation, and then it just the miracle morning. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
No.
I try to spend an hour every day. I do a little bit of reading from, you know, a Melody Beattie, Journey to the Heart. I journal, I meditate, I do just like 10 minutes of mild yoga. And it's just kind of, so that's been huge.
Great. Good for you. Good for you.
And
yeah. These practices are going to be very helpful because they can support you even if you're not feeling this all the time, this connectivity, right? Mm-hmm. If you're just feeling it sometimes, that's enough, because you can go back to that feeling of like, oh, I know that I felt this at one point, so I know it's true, right? If you don't ever have the experience of connectivity, then it's difficult to embrace it as more than just a concept, right? But if you're able to truly experience that, you know, then it's much easier to find your way back to that.
Yes, and it helps too. I can see my feelings and my belief growing in that connectivity and that trust because of it. It's interesting. I have a Pisces sun friend, empath, big time. I'm an empath, and it's interesting the differences between us, which is why I think I'm, you know, kind of focusing more in on this as well, is because I've never, you know, done a lot of work or understanding Neptune.
Right. And, you know, having Neptune so close to the sun is almost like having a Pisces sun, right? Even though it's a little different because it's in Scorpio, but having Neptune there is a very strong Piscean signature within this Scorpio stellium, right? So honoring that Pisces energy or that Neptune energy is highly important for you, because if you don't do it, you're going to feel very overwhelmed, confused, separate, to the degree where you really just want to like escape wherever possible.
Right. And that's where what you said earlier, it was like, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, the difference between me and my friend, she has a lot more trust in than I do.
And this is because you have it in Scorpio, right? Because Scorpio has difficulty with trust.
Yes.
Okay. And the reason for that is because there has been some kind of past trauma or some kind of disempowerment that you have experienced in the past, in connection with your family, your upbringing, your home, right?
Yep. Oh, yes.
So because of that past and because of that upbringing, it's hard for you to trust. But that doesn't mean that you will never ever trust again. It just means that for you, it's more of an experiment in surrendering yourself to something bigger than yourself, right?
Yes.
Because once Scorpio can surrender, it is the most transformative, most powerful energy there is. It's just that sometimes with Scorpio, we hang on, right? We go, I'm not letting go. Like it's my trauma.
That's so true.
I want to keep it. Keep it.
It is so true. And I also completely agree with your statement about when you can. It is very transformative. I mean, I'm seeing that it's a process, and
exactly.
that part of me that wants to snap my fingers and make it so is
the impatient part, of course.
Yeah. So
and you do have Jupiter there as well, right? So there's a part of you that's impatient about it as well.
Yes. Yeah. And actually that came up, I think, at the last forum. That's why I love, because and I haven't, been studying regularly, recently, but there's just always more nuances that you can pull out.
Learn. Yes.
And I think like everything, it comes to us, or it becomes obvious to us when we're ready.
Absolutely. Yes.
Whether that's whatever's going on in our life or whatever, I would like to absorb it all right now. That's just one of that intensity and everything. But, it has shown that to me. So, I think I've always probably Saturn I pay attention to. It's just interesting what this is kind of highlighted for me from an astrology weather perspective, is that I've never really, again, paid a lot of attention to Neptune. And yet it's something that is very important for me.
It's very important for you. It's a very important, it's like smack between your Venus and your sun. So it's a very important, it's like sandwiched right in there, I mean, Jupiter is important too, because it's also sandwiched between your Mercury and your sun, but Neptune is just as important. Yeah. And of course we often forget about Neptune because Neptune is such a subtle energy, right? It's so subtle. It's like your intuition, right? Your intuition is not going to be there slapping you in the face going like, hello, that's your mind, right? But your intuition is going to be like, it's like this wind that blows through you in a very gentle, kind, and loving way. And you either listen to it or you don't. And either way, it's fine. Because Neptune is not attached to anything, right? Neptune is not like you have to listen to your intuition. That would be Saturn, right? Neptune is just more like, like you do what's right for you right now in this moment. It's all good, be in the flow, allow it to be whatever it is. Like there's nothing that Neptune is not okay with. Right.
And I see that in my friend that is the Pisces sun so much. And that's an interesting part of our relationship is the differences, and the astrology helps me a lot with it. She's
in your 8th house, right?
Yeah.
So that's a great place for you to learn about, your own connectivity to the divine.
Yeah. Well, and I admire those parts of her, of that, just, it is subtle, and her belief is subtle, and it's like, wow, so, you know, it's a process.
For sure.
And our world, certainly, you know, we have different challenges at different times. So
yeah,
it's a tough world these days.
It is a tough world these days, but we're all getting a chance, you know, within that energetic shifting that's going on currently. We're all getting a chance to really step up to the plate, you know, and some people will and some people won't, and that's fine too, right? But it's an opportunity, right? We have to always see things as an opportunity, because if we can't see it as an opportunity, we're already lost.
Right? Yes. Well, and I think, and that's why I think Neptune is, the discussion is perfect, because the trust is so important always, but with what's going on in our world, there's so much we really have no control over, and it can be very
so much no control. Yeah. And of course, Pluto in Capricorn right now, in a late degree of Capricorn, right, is showing us how little control we really have over what goes on out there in the world with governments, economy, you know, all the social structures, like no control, right? And so wherever Pluto is, that's a place for us to surrender, and that's a place for us to trust and to let go. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, Marcia, and for sharing your chart with us. This was beautiful. I'm glad we were able to do that. So let me just go to the last page about next month's forum. If anybody's interested in joining us for this, obviously will be about Jupiter again, because we already talked about Jupiter and Aries in a past forum, but this time we're going to focus a little bit more on the station phase that's happening in that particular degree. And we're also going to focus on the Uranus conjunction to the North Node in Taurus, right? Because that is a very unusual energetic right there, because this is something that we don't always get to experience, Uranus conjunct the North Node, right? Especially not in Taurus. So yeah, the last time, you know, Uranus was in Taurus was in the 1930s. It's like an 85, 86 year cycle, right? Uranus. So every 85, 86 years comes back to its original place. That's when people have their Uranus return, right? Which is something we talk about in the soul-based astrology courses as well. These cycles, these planetary cycles. And you know, there's a lot that we can learn from, you know, a cycle that has previously happened, but also to understand that the current cycle is going to bring up new stuff, and it's going to be slightly different from the last cycle. And that's always important to remember, because I always think, you know, when I read astrology articles from other astrologers about certain aspects or cycles, you know, they're very, some people, not everybody, get really stuck on, you know, like, ooh, the last time Uranus was in Taurus, this and this happened. And, you know, they just kind of like get a little bit too attached to the past, you know. But what we have to remember is that consciousness changes all the time, every day, and that consciousness rises, right? Even though it doesn't maybe look that way right now, that consciousness is rising and that we're lifting our consciousness right now, but we are. It's just that because we're lifting our consciousness to such a degree, we're also seeing all the shadow stuff more clearly. We're becoming more aware of all the goo that's there too, because that's part of life, right? Part of life is not a fairy tale. Life is like everything under the rainbow, right? Like all the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, but we get to be more aware of the ugly right now, because we've raised our consciousness to such a degree that we can handle it. We can handle the ugly, because previously our consciousness was not ready to even handle this kind of stuff. You know, it would have been too much. So I think we have to keep that in mind, right? That consciousness always rises, it always grows. It's just that, of course, depending on where we focus, we can see that consciousness has been expanding on the whole. But of course, if we focus too much on the kind of information that gives us only a slice of life, like the news or the media, the mainstream media, we only get to experience a slice of what's true, and that then slants our experience of what's actually going on in our lives, right? And if we have a little bit more of a wider spread intake of information from all different sources, we're able to see that that things are not as dire and as bad as they maybe appear to be when we're only looking at certain information, right? Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for being here. And if you have any kind of feedback for me, please feel free to email me at info@astrologercoach.com and write feedback in the subject line, or you can just email me. I always love to hear your thoughts on the webinars and what I'm doing. Always lovely to hear. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you guys again next month, hopefully, if you guys are able to join. And Leah, are you doing okay? Everything's good? I know you're probably dealing with multiple things at the same time, as always.
I sure am.
Sure am. I know. You have 3 kids, so I get it.
I'm so happy to be able to be here today. That was very, very, very wonderful. Thank you so much.
Good. I'm glad.
Are the forums always on Saturdays now? Is that
this year they are on Saturdays because that's how I've scheduled them, but I might change that again for next year because it seems like Saturdays are not the best time for people. And I was surprised because I thought Saturday would be a better time for people, but it doesn't seem that that's the way. Is Saturday a good day for you or a bad day for you, Marcia?
Yeah, it's good. And you and I had emailed about if I sign up, for the star, because I'm interested. I mean, I've kind of reignited. Yeah. This is another tool for me, for everything, Yeah. So, and that's why, because I would like to be able to be on most of them. I know the recording is great, but I love the interaction. Yeah. So that's why I was wanting. So yeah. I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. I think you'd sent me an email. I haven't followed up on it as far as since I'm an annual pay, how that will work if I do the star now.
Yeah, what I can do is I can reimburse you for the annual once you've started the star membership, and then I can reimburse you for the charge for the forum as well if you're gonna do it this weekend. Okay. And then that way you start your star membership with this forum.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm definitely interested and there may be once in a while that I can't, but I think mostly
you always get the recordings as well, right? Remember that even if you can't join live, you can still ask questions in advance that I can cover during the forum as well, and you can always listen to the recording after.
And with as the star membership, I don't need to sign up for the form. Is that correct? Or do I still need to sign up?
You're automatically registered every time. Yeah. So it makes
that's another.
I know it makes it easier because you just get the emails and you don't have to worry about a thing. Just check your emails, right? You've got to check. Yeah. You got to make sure that you receive my emails, right? If they land in your junk mail, make sure that you say mark them as important or whatever.
Right. Yes. No, I don't think I've ever had an issue with that. So yeah, good there.
All right. So thanks for joining me, everybody, and have a lovely rest of your weekend. Thanks for watching. If you're watching this as a recording. And again, if there are any questions, feel free to email me and, I'll do my best to answer them via email, and I'll let you know if a reading is required. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Marcia. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.